Hey there everybody! I just got back from hosting 5 tours around the Galapagos Islands, so be ready for a video about that sometime soon. I also just did a paleo dig with an organization called Native Explorers that helps get Native Americans into science and medicine, so expect a video about that sometime soon as well. In between those things, I did my annual science road trip to VidCon, so be ready for a video about that sometime soon as well. And to top it all off, my charity project, Roll for InitiaGive, has officially raised over $16,500 for Doctors Without Borders, and we're not even done with the series yet. I'm in an exceptional mood, so let's celebrate with my most popular series on any platform. Welcome back to Reacteria. Today, we're going to be looking at this video called 21 Facts That Stupid Scientists and Atheists Can't Answer. Stupid Scientist Atheist. This video was literally made for me. Now, there are 2 important things to mention right at the outset. The first is that you don't answer facts. And the second is that this video is 15 years old, having been uploaded on December 26th, 2009. And the crazy thing is that this is actually a repost of a repost. The original posting was supposedly from the Discovery Institute, the shady theocratic pseudoscience organization that I talked about in this video. Now, I don't know when the original video was posted or why it was removed from YouTube, whether it was pulled down intentionally or if it was taken down for some community guideline violation or whatever. But what I do know is that another channel called Amazing Believer reposted the video with the title 21 Questions That Evolutionists Can't Answer and a description saying this is the Discovery Institute's video, I'm reposting it because it's been removed from YouTube, and it stayed there for about 15 years until I was writing this video, and the account The Amazing Believer has just been banned. Fortunately, Amazing Believer wasn't the only one who reposted it. I was able to find another tiny channel that had reposted it all the way back in 2009, so we can still see it in all of its beautiful early YouTube glory. It's particularly striking to me because I've wanted to be a YouTuber since being a YouTuber was a thing. I remember watching all those iconic, early, original channels and dreaming of the day that I could be like those people. And little did I know at the time that 5 months before I graduated high school, somebody was posting a video that I would be responding to as a professional YouTuber someday. Those are some wild feels right there, y'all. Who would have thought that back in the days of Facebook, swine flu, Halo ODST, and Boxy, some small part of my internet career was being erected and I didn't even know it. There was no need for that line, I just wanted to say the word erected. Anyway, this video looks like a ton of fun, so without further ado, thank you to my patrons on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube for keeping food in my fridge and hope in my heart. And with that, let's get into the video. So as we get into this, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is that this video is from old YouTube. That means crappy slideshow presentation style with licensed music playing over the whole thing. The music in this video is Dare You to Move by Switchfoot. I'm not going to leave that in for several reasons. So the music that you're going to hear anytime I'm playing this video is music that I have put in, but that doesn't change the video in any meaningful way. Now, it would be pretty pointless for me to sit here and criticize this video for looking outdated when it is, in fact, outdated. So instead, let's just focus on the supposedly unanswerable questions, like this one, why are planets round? Now, this is a great question, but in the context that it's being asked, it's pretty silly, because it has nothing to do with atheism or evolution or whatever the other titles of these reposts are, and most importantly, it's very answerable. Even back in 2009, it was very answerable. Gravity applies the same in all directions, so the natural shape of a very large thing is gonna be a sphere. There can be little variations on the surface of the sphere, but any variations that are too big, like say, for example, the edges of a cube-shaped planet, would very quickly be crushed under their own weight. As big as the variations between mountains and trenches appear to us here on the surface of the Earth, if we were to shrink the Earth down to the size of like a cue ball, it would be about as smooth as a cue ball. And again, this is not news in any way. This is a very, very answerable question. Just for funsies, here's a clip of Carl Sagan answering that exact same question from a 6th grader several decades ago.
Why is the Earth round? Why isn't it square or any other shape?
That's a good question. I like that question. That's a question I've asked myself. And the answer has to do with gravity. The Earth has a strong gravity. If you were to make a mountain very high higher than Everest, you know, it's the biggest mountain on the Earth, it would be crushed by its own weight. You see, gravity pulls everything towards the center. So any really big bump on the Earth is crushed.
So again, great question. Glad to see that you're asking questions, but it is an answerable question. And putting it at the very beginning of your video does not give me high hopes about your ability to effectively grapple with evolutionary theory. Oh, would you look at that as a straw man of evolution presented by a meme. That's actually what pops up immediately next in the video. And indeed, we will be seeing more of these cringy memes after every single one of these supposedly unanswerable questions throughout the length of the video, because again, it was 2009. It's because humans did not evolve from chimpanzees, we just share a common ancestor, and even if that wasn't the case, that's not how speciation works. I don't know why I wore a hoodie to do this, it's like 97 degrees out here. Right. Don't know why I had to drive all the way to the zoo for that, but I'm glad we got it out of the way. So next we get a cartoon of a man smoking opium and something silly about atheism, and now we're at number 3 where we're being asked another easily answerable question. We do know how mountains form, but that's not actually what they asked. All they asked was, have you ever seen a mountain form? And the answer to that is no. I have never seen a mountain form. No is an answer to a supposedly unanswerable question that has nothing to do with science or atheism or evolution or anything else. It's honestly kind of wild that they would include this, because even if I were to address it in good faith, the spirit in which it was asked here seems to imply that science and atheism are synonyms, and that the preferred explanation for geologic processes is just magic. In case anyone is curious, by the way, plate tectonics is usually what causes mountain ranges to form. Two plates move against each other, and either one or both of them start to pile up, resulting in mountains. There are some ways that you can form mountains without them being on a plate boundary. The volcanoes of Hawaii forming mountains, for example, but those are relatively pretty rare. But again, that's not the answer to the unanswerable question that they're asking here. The actual question being posed is, have you ever seen a mountain form? And the answer is no. Similarly, the answer to the question, is ignorance of geology justification for belief in creationism, is also no. And of course, you don't get to see question 4 before sitting through another one of these things. New life doesn't arise in a jar of peanut butter because a jar of peanut butter does not resemble the conditions that we have learned are conducive to the formation of life in almost any way. Also, even if that wasn't true, new life would be microscopic. So unless you're testing every bit of every jar of peanut butter under a microscope, you would have no idea whether new life was forming there or not. Well, that was just a picture of a man. Was that supposed to be some sort of a jab at scientists doing experiments on monkeys? We can probably assume so, because the video is framed as pretty anti-scientist, so it would make sense that they would want to paint the whole picture of science as being bad. Just so many first of alls. What do you mean by up? What do you mean by hold? Why do you assume that the thing that you're talking about here is a who? Why do you assume this person is holding anything? If they are holding something in the way that I think about holding something, how are they holding something that is infinitesimally small? Where is this person if they are outside of the universe? When is this person if they are outside of time? And most importantly, have you ever actually asked a scientist or an atheist this question? Because I fail to believe that you really think it's unanswerable. That's not even a question. That's just a statement. How am I supposed to answer that? Well, I guess I'm not supposed to answer that because this is facts that scientists can't answer, but that's not even a fact. That's just a bad syllogism. Cars require drivers to move. Therefore, there must be some sort of invisible jockey that's guiding all horses. Flamingos are pink and flamingos are birds. Therefore, all birds are pink. Haikus are poetry and Shakespeare wrote poetry. Therefore, Shakespeare wrote haikus. Take that, evolutionists! Just because some complex objects require a designer does not mean that all complex objects require a designer. You're overgeneralizing, and overgeneralizing is bad for your health. Well, what was that picture? Was the frightened guy supposed to be an atheist or a scientist or whatever? Why was that in the video? Well, wait a minute, how did we get to number 21? You're over here asking how monkeys give birth to people. I want to know how 6 gave birth to 21. This question makes no sense for 3 main reasons. Number 1 being that speciation doesn't work that way. You can think about this sort of like languages. There was never a time when someone who spoke Latin gave birth to a child who spoke French. It was a long change in dialect over the course of countless generations until eventually the Latin that these people were speaking was so distinct from original Latin that they couldn't call it Latin anymore, and that's what French is. Same thing with animals or plants or fungi or whatever. It's never that one species just gives birth to another species. It's a slow change over time, and also species aren't a real thing. That's a whole other conversation. Number 2, individuals don't evolve, populations evolve. We're talking about a change in the heritable characteristics of an entire population over the course of multiple generations until everybody's metagenome is different, not just one single male or female of one individual species popping up amongst a group of monkeys. That makes absolutely no sense. Third, and most importantly, humans are monkeys. Cladistically speaking, humans are a species of great ape, and great apes are a type of old world catarrhine monkey. So to say, what if a monkey gave birth to a human, it's like saying, what if a bird gave birth to a duck? It's just not specific enough to actually mean anything. And then we get another silly picture, and we're back to gravity. Look, guys, if you want to understand gravity or how planets are formed or anything like that, just crack open a physics textbook. But it has nothing to do with atheism or with evolution, and it's definitely something that we have an answer for. Even back in the distant age of 2009, we knew how gravity worked, and it had to do with relativity, not with heredity, and certainly not with divinity. I can explain it, but I promise it's not going to help either one of us. Fantastic question, Discovery Institute. Now let me ask you a question too. If Americans came from the British, why are there still British people? Have you ever seen a British person give birth to an American person? If a British person did give birth to an American person, who would it mate with? This is supposed to be the Discovery Institute, y'all. This is the scientific authority on creationism. This is what they were doing 15 years ago. That is wild. See, this is the problem with videos like this, especially ones from the early internet, is that Poe's law is in full effect here. It's hard enough to look at a modern video and try to figure out if the silly things that they're saying are genuinely supposed to be slam dunks against science. But something like this, I can't tell if they're being ridiculous on purpose or if they actually just have zero self-awareness and there's a reason they pulled this video down. Let's look through a few more of these real quick and just see if they get any better. Yeah, no. Okay, so there's no way to tell if this is actually serious, but it's clear that even if it was serious at the time, there's no reason to be taking it seriously now. So instead, let's hop over to this video from a channel called Creation Evidence Museum, where a man named Carl Baugh is going to ask some questions directly, so at least we can see that he's not smirking at us the whole time. Oddly enough, this video is from 9 years ago, so it's not exactly what we wanted, but it's still a blast from the past.
Recently, I received communication from David Wetzel, a very fine creation researcher and a very fine scientist himself. Intrepid in that he has been willing to trek into the very jungles in search of evidence that had been reported.
David Wetzel is a self-described cryptozoology researcher who has made his career traveling around the world in search of cryptids, specifically dinosaur-like cryptids, so that he can, quote, reclaim dinosaurs to the glory of our awesome creator. He's still around today, and the 5 questions that Carl Baugh is about to ask are listed on his website. Also listed on his website are his upcoming expeditions, like this one for this year, in search of Mokele Bembe, an apatosaur-like creature similar to the Loch Ness Monster, supposedly somewhere in the jungles of Cameroon. So just remember, when Carl describes this guy as a very fine scientist, he is referring to a professional Bigfoot hunter.
And he sent me some communication recently that I thought was too good
to be true,
not to pass on to you.
Oh.
He said, there are 5 questions for evolutionists that I'd like to ask. And he said, so far, no evolutionist has been able to answer these at all. Any one of them, let alone all 5 of them.
We're going to be answering all 5 today.
The first question David Wetzel proposes is, where did all this come from? All of this, where did it come from?
And just like that, we are right back where we were with the last video, where physics and cosmology and the Big Bang are all the same thing as evolution. Guys, these are different concepts. And most importantly, even if we didn't know about the Big Bang, even if we didn't know where anything came from, that wouldn't be a reason to believe in creationism, because not knowing how something happened does not mean that magic is a valid alternative hypothesis.
In order to explain how the universe could arrive from a Big Bang, from an infinitely small speck of energy to what we have, you have to totally ignore all of the laws of physics, basically the laws of thermodynamics. You have to totally re-explain in non-entity factors that just do not exist. There is no science behind the Big Bang.
No science is a really weird way to pronounce Hubble's law, cosmic microwave background radiation, relative abundance of light elements, and math.
Where did all this come from? You only have 3 possibilities.
What do you want to bet that none of the possibilities he's about to give will accurately describe the Big Bang in any meaningful way? I'll bet you a subscription. You have to subscribe, and if you're already subscribed, then you got to go to my Roll for InitiaGive fundraiser and donate at least $1 to Doctors Without Borders. And if he does it, I'll donate at least $1 and I'll subscribe to myself.
Number 1, matter has always existed. That is not fashionable in physics or astrophysics nor science today, because we know that there was a beginning. In fact, it has been established that there was a beginning to the expansion factor, so matter has not always existed. The second alternative is, well, this matter just came out of nothing. But that's against all the laws of physics. Now, I know there have been some squirrely ideas about quantum fluctuations, and squirrely they are, because they meet none of the criteria of good science, good math, and good physics.
I would pay real money to watch this guy give a scientific presentation on those squirrely ideas and his analysis of the evidence at hand and where he thinks the math is lacking.
First concept is that matter has always existed. That meets no scientific criteria. Second concept is that matter just popped out of nothingness. That meets no scientific criteria. However, the third alternative is that all of this was uniquely designed and came into existence by sound and energy.
Which meets no scientific criteria. Also, you now owe me a subscription and/or a donation to Doctors Without Borders.
Now, currently, physicists and astrophysicists have recognized that the base of all subatomic particles is sound and vibration. And that is totally consistent with, in fact, mandated by the scriptures themselves. God spoke and it was done.
Yeah, they've recognized no such thing. Sound is caused by vibrations, but sound is a mechanical pressure wave. It's particles bumping into one another. Subatomic particles do vibrate, but they don't inherently carry on that vibration and propagate it with other particles the way that sound does, because particles are things, sound is an event. And subatomic particles certainly are not made of sound. That makes no sense whatsoever. Like, even if this guy was talking about waves or wave functions in like quantum mechanical terms, I'm no physicist, but I'm pretty sure that probability distributions are not sound waves, so All this guy is doing is using weird metaphorical language in place of an actual understanding of these scientific concepts. But hey, if Carl or you or anybody else wanted to learn about some of this stuff, there's ways to do that. In fact, there's an app called Brilliant, which has courses in both classical mechanics and quantum mechanics. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is loaded with courses in real math and science that are taught in a fun and interactive way to keep your brain going and your education growing. Their laid-back, highly educational style is uniquely effective for both new and experienced learners alike, as every lesson was crafted by an award-winning team of teachers and researchers from renowned institutions like MIT, Caltech, Duke, and more. And the best part is, they're offering my subscribers everything that they have to offer for free for a full 30 days, plus 20% off an annual subscription to Brilliant Premium, and all you gotta do to get it is go to brilliant.org/Forrest Valkai, or just use the link in the description below. Brilliant teaches you cool stuff, builds your problem-solving skills, and helps you develop a daily learning habit that will keep you on the path of scientific awesomeness for all of your days. And as I mentioned before, they even have courses in both classical and quantum mechanics, so you can learn awesome facts about the nature of reality, like that subatomic particles aren't made of sound, because what does that even mean? So get started today by heading over to brilliant.org/Forrest Valkai or using the link in the description below to try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days and get 20% off your annual subscription to Brilliant Premium. It's fun, it's risk-free, and it helps the channel a whole bunch. Looking back at the video, I feel like it's important to point out that the whole sound and vibration thing is a complete tangent. It isn't even in Wetzel's original 5 questions. That's not to say that those 5 questions are any less silly, though. In fact, the very first sentence of this document is, "The cosmological argument is still one of the best refutations of atheism out there." For anybody who isn't familiar, the cosmological argument is the argument that anything that exists must have a cause, and the universe exists, therefore there must be a God who created the universe. In case it isn't abundantly obvious, this is a very bad argument for several reasons. Now, I'm no physicist, so I'm not going to get into the quantum mechanical arguments that Carl is apparently well trained enough to dismiss out of hand, but what I am going to say is that the whole cause and effect thing only exists because time exists. The Big Bang is the beginning of time, so I don't know what it means to ask what happened before it was possible for anything to happen before anything. What are you talking about with a time before time existed? And that's exactly the problem, is that whereas an honest person would be able to say, I don't know what's going on here, I know so little about this that I don't even know how to properly ask a question about it, creationists like Carl Baugh see ignorance as an opportunity to start cramming in magic. It's also important to point out that even if we accept the initial premise of the argument, that everything needs a cause, including the universe itself, that does not mean that the cause has to be a God. And it certainly doesn't mean that it has to be the Christian God. And yet, people like Carl and David will constantly assert that it's not just the creationist worldview that makes the most sense, it's the Christian creationist worldview. And not just any kind of Christianity, their specific interpretation of their version of their translation of the Bible that is used in their church within their denomination. That is the only thing that makes sense. There are plenty of Christian creationists that don't believe in a global flood. There are plenty of Christian creationists that don't believe that dinosaurs ever existed. There are plenty of Christian creationists that believe that the Bible is to be interpreted and not taken literally. There are plenty of Christian creationists who believe that the Bible should never be taken as anything less than the absolute literal truth. And of course, it's always their preferred version of the Bible that is perfect and infallible. The other ones are all mistranslated and corrupted. Finally, the cosmological argument has the issue of infinite regress. If everything needs a cause, and therefore God caused the universe, then what caused her? And what about the thing before that, and the thing before that, and the thing before that, on and on and on forever? And the only way out of this paradox is a logical fallacy called special pleading, where just like a child who changes the rules of the game in order to never lose the game, the creationists will simply say, everything needs a cause, except for God, who's special because they're supernatural, so they don't have to play by the same rules. This is such a common and predictable workaround that it's right here in the second paragraph of David Wetzel's questions, along with a Bible verse. Because again, for all their talk about Occam's razor and avoiding assumptions, they are always ready to make the assumption that their specific God and all the supernatural baggage that comes along with it is the only possible explanation for the natural world. And if you don't believe me, here's Carl Baugh saying exactly that.
The creation model is totally scientific. In fact, theorems that involved Occam's razor, and those theorems have to do with a straight line being the shortest distance. And his theorems also mandate that any concept that has the least amount of assumptions is the plausible concept to accept. Well, the concept of evolution postulates another of the questions, how did all of this come from rocks? All of these assumptions, they range from 6 to 13 to 15 assumptions. They're listed primarily as 7 assumptions, placing all living systems in kinship, but not a single one of them has ever been observed, cannot be reproduced in the laboratory after billions of dollars of experimental procedures. But creation begins with one simple assumption, that the universe and the living systems in it are so complicated they require a designer. That designer is the God of the Bible.
Seriously, every single time a creationist brings up the cosmological argument, it has all of the excitement and intrigue of a weather forecast. It's just a tired, worn-out argument that we've all heard 1,000 times, and sometimes they change the words, but it's always the same thing.
David Wetzel goes on to ask other questions. First of all, where did it all come from? Secondly, how could a Big Bang create a fine-tuned universe that we see? Scientists recognize that it's fine-tuned to 1 part in 100 billion, 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 billion. Absolutely impossible by accident.
Not at all impossible by accident. Something that is impossible by accident would have a 0% chance of happening. You just described something with a very low chance, not a 0% chance. Also, where are you getting those numbers? What other universes have you compared this one to in order to make the assessment that you just gave? Also, what do you mean by fine-tuned? You can't just say that something is fine-tuned to a certain degree and not tell us what knobs are being turned and what the other possibilities are. Also, if the laws of physics were different, it stands to reason that they would result in a different universe or maybe no universe at all. As a thought experiment, let's assume that the laws of physics are completely arbitrary and that they're just the result of whatever caused the Big Bang, as if that concept makes any sense. That would fall in line with what Carl is saying here, that the universe is so specifically fine-tuned just this way. But then it would also mean that if whatever that first thing was a little bit different, that the universe would just be some other way. The laws of physics would have fallen in a different pattern, in a different order, and resulted in another universe that you could then easily say was specially fine-tuned that way and couldn't be anything else. Any particular way that the universe is tuned is fine-tuned. Like, this is just the cosmological version of the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. All he's saying here is that the universe is the way it is, and that necessarily means that somebody intended for it to be this way. Meanwhile, if there were any other universes to look at, they would also be at least equally as fine-tuned as this one, just in different directions. Fine-tuning doesn't mean anything if there are no alternatives. What does a rough-tuned universe look like? Give me an example of a poorly tuned universe to which we can contrast our finely tuned one. Carl asked the question here, but he doesn't expound on it, which is probably for the best for him because David goes all out and presents the whole argument for irreducible complexity, which, if you aren't familiar, is the ridiculous notion that complex things couldn't have evolved because it would have required different parts evolving at different times, because that's how they think evolution works. He even cites a paper here that says that dual coding is nearly impossible by chance. For those who are curious, dual coding is when you can have multiple genes transcribed on the same DNA sequence, so you can get a different result based on where you start reading that sequence. It's a lot more common in viruses and bacteria, where genome space is pretty limited, but it is a thing in eukaryotes as well. And David cites this claim as coming from, quote, the Korean biomedical expert Chung et al. For those who aren't familiar with how citations work, that means Chung and the other people on the paper. Et al. Basically just means and the rest. When you have several authors on one paper, you just use the last name of the first author and then et al. To mean there's a lot more people here. So David is citing the great biomedical expert known as the 5 people who wrote this paper. And how do I know that this paper has 5 authors? It's because I looked the paper up, and I found that David's quote that dual coding is nearly impossible by chance is actually the middle of a sentence. And the rest of that sentence and the next couple of sentences altogether read, here we show that although dual coding is nearly impossible by chance, a number of human transcripts contain overlapping coding regions. Using newly developed statistical techniques, we identified 40 candidate genes with evolutionarily conserved overlapping coding regions. Because our approach is conservative, we expect mammals to possess more dual coding genes. Our results emphasize that the skepticism surrounding eukaryotic dual coding is unwarranted. Rather than being artifacts, overlapping reading frames are often hallmarks of fascinating biology. They weren't saying this is so impossible that it clearly points to creationism. They were saying we shouldn't be skeptical about this because it clearly happens a lot. And if you think that quote mining is bad, just wait till you hear question 4, which is...
Fourthly, he asked, how could biological systems assemble by accident? They could not. And no evolutionary explanation is adequate.
And if you check David's resource document, he quote mines Darwin himself by saying, in his book on the origin of species, Charles Darwin remarked, to suppose that the eye could have formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. Now, we've been down this road plenty of times before, all the way back to the very first episode, but let's revisit it one more time, shall we? Remember, when a creationist quotes an esteemed biologist as saying that evolution is unreliable or uncredible, just look up what that person actually said and then read the very next sentence. In this case, the full sentence and the next sentence from On the Origin of Species reads, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. Yet, reason tells me that if numerous gradations from a perfect and complex eye to a very imperfect and simple one, each grade being useful to its possessor, can be shown to exist, if further the eye does vary ever so slightly and the variations be inherited, which is certainly the case, and if any variation or modification in the organ be ever useful to an animal under changing conditions of life, then the difficulty of believing that a perfect and complex eye could be formed by natural selection, though insuperable by our imagination, can hardly be considered real. He didn't say, I freely admit this makes no sense. He said, I freely admit that this sounds crazy at face value, but reason and evidence have demonstrated that it's true.
Finally, the 5th question he asked the evolutionist, and I'm asking the evolutionist viewing this episode today.
That's me. He's talking about me.
How is it that we have a soul?
We don't. Is there more? How is it that you have wings? Oh, you don't? Okay. Moving on.
We are a person.
We are not. I mean, you are and I am, but like we are not. We am not a person.
Who recognizes there is a God.
No, we don't. See, the fundamental thing here is that I don't.
Not to believe in God means you have to literally convince yourself beyond all the evidence.
What evidence? You haven't given any evidence here. One of you just said wrong things about physics, and the other one of you just grammatically conflated 5 biologists into one person.
Why does a person disbelieve in God?
For the exact same reason that you don't believe in any other possible God, including all of the incompatible versions of your God amongst the over 40,000 denominations of Christianity.
Primarily, I know because I walked that trail.
And now you are off the trail. You are trailing off. What is this video, dude?
Primarily, it is because of resentment towards suffering and loss. Believing that God has not been fair to you. Therefore, if God has not been fair to you, you will just rub him out. And that's essentially what atheism does.
Just out of curiosity, Carl, how much would your parents have to hurt you in order for you to stop believing they exist? Not believing something is real and not believing something is good are two different questions.
I ask of my friends on the other side of the camera, just accept the facts and realize that you were created and put your trust in the God of the Bible.
Yeah, just believe me, and then you'll believe me. What a great message. Thank you so much, Carl. Bottom of this video lists Carl Baugh as the director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, and a quick Google search shows that Carl is still the director there to this very day. I wonder if you'd be interested in talking sometime. Well, this sucked. I give both of these awful videos and David Wetzel's questions a total combined average science teacher challenge level 2 out of 10. Most of these questions didn't have anything to do with evolution, but even those that did required very little science knowledge to get through. The only reason I'm gonna give them as high of a score as they did is because they are frustratingly common arguments that convince a lot of people. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind you once again to please support my fundraiser for Doctors Without Borders. Even if you're not into TTRPG stuff, that's fine. If you donate through my links, I can track the donations and then use those numbers to get better sponsors to do more fundraisers in the future. Doctors Without Borders is an unimpeachable organization with an incredible cause, so please just skip a cup of coffee for a day so you can throw them $5 and they can save somebody's life. And with that, I'm Forrest Valkai. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and all the other stuff you do here on YouTube. Please exit through the gift shop on your way out, pick up one of these sweet t-shirts, have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye!
Should you have need of anything, Dugan is a fabulous bartender.
I'm sure Dugan is.
He's like, over here! And you just see like a hand like reach up behind a tall bar and point downwards at a shiny little deep dwarf head.
Hi, Dugan.
Oi!
You exist? All right.
All right, what about you there,
Ale's
Stretch?
good.
I prefer to keep my wits about me. Your finest water, please.
We don't do that here.
Then I'll just sit with whatever's in this.
Right, that's
I know you're already dead, Doctor, but try to live.
what? That's a spittoon. So
Can I just get some ale?
you sure can.
So good. So good.
Sorry.
Aw. That might put a hair on your chest, Doctor. Well done.
It's got hair in it. Yeah, here's a top shelf or bottom shelf. Alexander, love, aye. One more for the tall guy. Send him this, and he sends over like a little crystal glass of something kind of fizzy and nice.
Ooh.
My mouth tastes like everyone's mouth.
He's like, let me cleanse your palate there, and